I think a lot of people have some moment in their life where they know they've been lied to. For me, it was 9/11. It was as if I was in the cockpit, like I was inside the plane. That was where my mind and my being took me. You feel it, you feel the confusion, you feel the fear. It was like there was this glitching in and out. We all can do it. Just some have a natural ability that's really undeniable, and some have to really work at it.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for coming on at kind of short notice as well, because I thought about what it might have been like from your perspective when you got a message from me. And I'm assuming you probably clicked on my profile and you might have saw an AI generated picture of yourself on my profile after I'd made a video about you and your reading from 2014. So thank you for not just running for the hills and thinking, who is this strange man with a picture of me on his profile?
No, no. And honestly, now that all this stuff from that MH370 is coming to light, I've had so many people reach out to me, and I haven't really looked at that topic in a really long time. And I'm polite. I answer people and try to answer questions and guide people and that type of thing. But I don't know, something just jumped out when you said, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" I thought, why not? It's uh, jump out of my comfort zone and just do it, right?
Yeah, that's awesome, and I really appreciate you coming on, like I said. And I think we'll definitely get into the MH370 stuff. But I think first I would like to just maybe get a little background on yourself. Now, I like I mentioned when we spoke over message, I talk about what we sort of refer to as remote viewing. I don't do you use
Mhm.
that term?
Yes, when I first started to dabble with it, that's exactly what we called it. I have, gosh, it was probably around 2011. So, what, 14 years ago? That's when I even started dabbling in all that psychic stuff. And what we did was, or how I got started into it, someone bought me a reading for a gift. And when I went, I was really pretty in awe of how it happened because I thought, anybody that does psychic readings, you're gonna it was some hokey thing. You go to see them, they're wearing a turban, or it's just some show. So it was really a lot of curiosity. Well, she happened to offer development classes, and to do it and to get out of the house and to learn, and I thought it was interesting. I went, and it just really resonated with me. Well, part of that development, those classes that she did, was every time we go in, we'd do something a little different, whether it was psychometry, which is picking up a random object and reading it, or remote viewing. That was one of the things that we did, and that's how I was even introduced to it. So yes, it was many, many years ago when I started to dabble in that whole psychic arena. It was a person that was doing development classes, yeah.
So prior to getting this reading, it wasn't something really on your radar. You weren't too interested in it.
Well, here's the thing, from the time I was a little kid, and I wrote a book on this, kind of my story of how I even got into it, because that was one of the questions I got. How do you just wake up one day and you're doing this, right? Is it, it's just kind of a weird thing. People were curious. So when I was a kid, I mean, I could see things, hear things, feel things. I'd see ghosts, and I was terrified of them, and I hated it. And I hid from it, and I was always doing things to, have noise in the background, whether it was a TV running or anything. I hated the dark. I had a lot of weird things like that growing up, and I had an imaginary friend who I realized later in life was probably a ghost because nobody else saw her. I mean, it scared my mom because I would always be talking to her, but we were like best buds. It just a lot of peculiar things that some kids just don't do. And so I hid from it. I suppressed it because it was terrifying to me. I thought it was evil, and I thought a ghost was going to get me. And, think about it. We're programmed with all these horror movies as children, right? Poltergeist and Freddy Krueger and all that kind of stuff. So you never really saw anything positive happen to having an ability to tap into the other side. So it was just nothing I wanted to entertain or have attached to me or even be able to do. And then when I met my now husband, I was telling him about my imaginary friend, and just, you're telling these stories of your childhood. He was in awe about it. He's like, "Oh, this is great. You got to embrace it. You can do something that, other people can't do." And it all started coming back, and it came back tenfold. Stuff was happening in the house. I'd wake up and I'd see things. I remember one time we were laying in bed, and I woke up and I saw what I thought was him standing in the doorway. He's putting on a coat and a hat, which he doesn't wear a ball cap, so that threw me off. And I said to him, I'm like, where are you going? And it sounded like a robot voice. Have you ever seen Charlie Brown, how the teacher talks and it makes that wah, wah, wah? It was just this very distorted, weird voice. I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm getting annoyed because I think he's messing with me. Well, then I look down and he's laying in bed beside me. So it's like just very weird, creepy stuff. Um, and I really didn't want any part of it. So yeah, that's
In that moment, are you feeling like you're in a total normal awake state like we are now talking, or do you feel like you're kind of in a bit of a dreamlike state or something?
oh no, when that would happen, I was very awake. I was very awake and I
Wow.
laid there and I could not go back to sleep. And my go-to was always to
Yeah, I
hide from
bet.
it once I would realize what was going on. Like I woke up one time and I saw a lady praying over him, and it just freaked me out. I mean, it's so startling when it would happen. That was part of it. Is just it's not like this gradual, someone sauntering up to you. It's just always so random and it's just so unexpected. And that's what I didn't like it.
Yeah, you
Mhm.
said, when your husband kind of heard you and wasn't like, I found it really interesting that he was, so supportive and embracing of the stories that you told him, and then you said that it all came back tenfold. Do you think perhaps his sort of support and positive embracement of that helped somehow bring it back to the surface? Like that
Well, I
having
think
that belief from someone close to you?
yes, and I think a lot of it was too because I suppressed it and I didn't talk about it. I didn't entertain it. I didn't think about it. I always was pushing it out of my mind. It it was always maybe a little bit there, but it wasn't as energized maybe. And because of us talking about it, him entertaining it, him asking questions, me getting upset. Then you have the dog barking at nothing in the corner. I mean, I think just, and I would get annoyed even talking about it because I felt like talking about it was bringing it alive again. That's what it was. It was like something like a beast I'd put to sleep, and then he kept wanting to talk about it because he was so curious. This is probably one of the creepiest things ever. I was talking about, my imaginary friend with him one time, and he goes, you know what? Did someone ever die in that house? Because he's the one that made me realize, man, that might have been a ghost. I mean, I was in my 20s and I thought I had an imaginary friend. And then I realized maybe that wasn't what it was. So we decided we were going to go downstairs, and that's where his office was, and start putting in the address and just see if there's an obituary tied to it or whatever. Really skeptical, really nervous, but trying to just figure this out. So he went down there, and when he typed in the address, his computer went completely black. And if you've ever seen that word pad or that notepad that pops up on your computer, it said, and it was weird because it would be like lowercase and then caps. It was like the fonts were weird, but it was grammatically correct, if that makes sense. So it would be like a capital L, lowercase y, capital N, like just odd spelling, but you could read it. So it pops up and it's like, Lynn, this is Emily, your childhood friend. The reason you can't see me is because you've ignored me, but I've been with you. And like, was this letter to me coming through on the computer? I freak out. I start crying. And then immediately I blame him. I'm like, are you setting me up? Is this some like horrible joke? And he is trying to save the letter because he's wanting to read it. He's so like, wow, what's going on? I'm terrified. And I'm just sitting there and I don't even know how to respond or what's going on. And then it popped up again. So I would actually read it. And that's when I was able to actually read the whole message where it said, Lynn, this is Emily, your childhood friend, da 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 da. And it was this whole thing. But he wanted to save it, get a screenshot of it, something. And it just blipped off the computer once I read it. It was like it redid it so I could see it. And then it was gone into the ether. I mean, just weird, weird stuff. So I know there was something there. I can't explain exactly what it was. Yeah, it was what I just shared with you, how she was saying it was your childhood friend. The reason you don't see me is because you've suppressed it, but I've been there and I'll be with you your whole life. All you got to do is call upon me and you'll be able to see me again. Like it was this whole thing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't want that. I was just so scared of it. So going into a reading, I was okay with that, but the development stuff, it was more curiosity, and I was terrified to do it, and it took me a really long time to not be afraid of it and feel like I had control of what was around me and what wasn't. And I mean, it was a very long process. And, if I was reading for a person or doing something, making sure I detached from them, I mean, that was really important to me. And just the whole thing, it took a long time to really be comfortable in doing that. And now, fast forward 10 years later, I've really become more biblically aligned and um, kind of had this merge into Christianity where I don't partake in doing that necessarily. To each their own, but I've come to realize, and I think maybe my fears were there for a reason. I don't know, and I forced myself to work through it. But it's like, how do you decide when you're into the occult-ish type stuff? And I mean, doing readings and tarot and all that. I mean, seems innocent, but who's to say what's innocent and who's not? I mean, it's almost like looking at a war, and it depends on what perspective you are as to who's good and who's bad. Like, how do you decide? Oh, well, this part of occultism, that's okay because you're helping someone, and this isn't. And I started to get like kind of like a conviction of it because I tried to bridge the both. I tried to think, I'm working in the greater good. I'm helping people. I'm doing stuff. So I can go to church and I can um, worship and believe in a God, but I can still do this too. And then I just realized I couldn't. And that's why I stepped more away from doing that. And I got more into, the life and wellness coaching because it's my passion. I do love helping people. And there is a part of me that has this medical intuition that I just can't really hide from. So people will come to me for that. But I approach it like I say a prayer and it's like whatever I need to help these people or whatever I need to do, allow that to come through. And I mean, it's working and I'm okay. And I ask for signs all the time. If I'm not supposed to be doing this, let me know. But that's kind of in a nutshell how I got to where I am.
I definitely want to get into that shift that you spoke about there towards Christianity and away from remote viewing. But I just wanted to get a couple of details on a few things we just covered there because it's interesting. You're not the first person, the first medium, or however you'd like to term it,
Hmm.
who's told me about how they have had these sort of innate abilities since they were young and intentionally suppress them due to kind of being freaked out by them or finding it
Hmm.
it was actually difficult to acclimate with regular society when you feel like you're kind of perceiving things so much differently to everyone around you. So
Hmm.
I did find that very interesting, but I wanted to just pin you on the imaginary friend thing.
Hmm.
What is it like with that? Because, like, it does it feel like you have a person who's just as sort of solid and real as me and you that just sort of is next to you? Because the way I think of it is like, where does this person come from? Do you invite them to come hang out? How do they appear and you not be able to realize that they are different to, say, your husband or your friends at work? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. And these are questions that my husband had for me too. So, and he would say, "Is she always only in your house? Does she leave the house? Do you guys go
Mm,
outside to play?" So we were always inside the house. And as a kid, for whatever reason, things, you know how some things in life they don't seem strange because that's just the way they are. She was always in the
yeah.
house. And it would be like she would come through the kitchen and there she was. It wasn't like she came through the front door, but it was like she would just show up and we would be playing. And it would be just like you and I are talking right now. And I can vividly see her. But she always had on like this blue and whitish dress. She always had her hair parted down the middle. She had brunette hair and it had pigtail braids on the sides. Um, and here's what's funny too. When I was younger, I remembered her name as being Emily. Well, when I wrote my book, when I told my story, and my mom was reading it, she's like, No, her name was Alame, or at least in my 3, 4 year old language, that's what it sounded like." She goes, "No, you always called her Alame." I remembered her as Emily. So I don't know if her name was really Emily and my speech sounded like Alame or
Wow.
not, but my mom
Yeah.
would hear us talking. And I remember one time I'd overheard my mom. She was talking to my grandmother, who is her mother. She's like, "Yeah, she's in there talking to her imaginary friend again." I don't know. Like my mom was legit concerned because it was frequent. And she had a brother, Chaz, but my brother would ignore her brother, and he wasn't always there, so her brother didn't always hang out. I mean, it was just like a whole. That's just how it was. But she never went outside. And as a kid, I guess I never thought that was weird, but we had things we played inside. And I remember one time I got in trouble and my mom took something from me. I think it was a Barbie doll or something and put it up on this hutch that we had in our kitchen. She told me where it was. I went and got my chair, like kitchen chair, scooted it over, climbed up there and grabbed it. My mom comes out and she goes, "What are you doing?" I was like, I got my Barbie doll. And she goes, "How did you know that I put that up there?" And when I told her that Emily told me, I just heard she looked like a ghost herself. I mean, her eyes, like, oh my gosh, how is this? And it's just the way it was.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Very interesting. Let's let's move over to the MH370 stuff now. So when this plane disappeared, between that point and you doing that reading, because from what I understand, that reading was a request on your blog website, just
Yes.
from one of your followers. Is that correct?
Yes, because I had a blog and people could ask me pretty much anything. And I mean, everything went through that blog. That's what made it so cool because of all the variety on there. But yes, that
Hmm.
question popped on. And what I would do is I had a page where people could put whatever they wanted. And I would just see what resonated with me that day. Like, what do I want to tackle? And I would just kind of see what I was nudged toward. And I did a post on it. And it wasn't even that lengthy of one. And the response was crazy. I mean, that's the thing that really took my blog and my viewership up. I mean, it was insane. But part of it too, the people just it was a bizarre thing that had never really happened. And then you have all these people wanting closure, people wanting answers, people don't know what's going on, they don't know who to trust. So I understand what was
Mm.
going on, and that was what drove me to keep doing it. I never had a post that I followed up on the way that I did that, and it was just because people kept asking them the comments, and it tugged at my heart. I wanted to help these people and give some kind of answers or some closure to it, but yeah, that's how the whole thing even started.
When you were doing that reading, and you were probably, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes at that time, right? And you're doing this reading, and you're seeing what I imagine would be hard to kind of wrap your head around, right? Because it would probably not make sense what you're seeing. So could you maybe just first of all explain what you saw, but also what it felt like to see that? Like, were you second guessing yourself even to write what you were writing on the blog because it kind of sounds impossible?
So I learned early on to, when I would approach a reading and I would read the question, I set judgment aside. I learned early on, there was a quote someone told me. They said, when you go and you do this and you do this type of work, you have to place yourself on a shelf. You can't worry about judgment. You can't worry about if you're right or wrong. Sometimes the most bizarre things you get are actually the most accurate. So I learned you just go with what you have. I really didn't use the framework of, wow, this sounds so crazy, I'm not even going to say it. I just honestly go with the raw thing of what I had. And when I approached that question, I remember it was as if I was in the cockpit, like I was inside the plane. That was where my mind and my being took me. And it's you feel it, you feel the confusion, you feel the fear. It was like there was this glitching in and out. I remember seeing like electrical sparks. I mean, the whole thing, it was just, I would relate it to if you were watching a movie and it was like a glitch in the matrix. That's what I maybe could best describe it as being, but you're in that glitch, so you're really confused, you don't understand what's going on.
Wow. So you're seeing this from what felt like a pilot's perspective.
Yes, like I'm inside the plane and I'm witnessing it and I'm sort of helpless to it and don't understand it. And it was like, you have these safety protocols of what you're supposed to do, but you don't have a protocol for that. You don't.
Mm.
It's just like this electrical dark flashing, and it's happening quick, and you really have no control of anything. I think the instrument panels and all that, just it was almost like everything was immobilized, and you're glitch. It's like you were a glitch in the matrix, is what it was like.
Wow. And then what did you see?
So how they talk about the Bermuda Triangle and people getting teleported somewhere else? I and this, I mean, it did sound crazy. I will admit that, but I put it on paper. I felt like these people went somewhere else. That's what it felt like. And I had a theory, and I still kind of do, that the past, present, and future all sort of coincide. We're just different spots on the same DVD. And I felt like they jumped to maybe like a different time or place. That's what I initially got, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm verbalizing that right, but that's what it felt like. And just the confusion of it. And I really thought they ended up on some kind of an island. That's what I felt like. Um, Maybe because that was just the easiest place for them to safely land, but it was almost like they were in a different time.
Different time. And then reading further on from your blog, you kind of did following up, like you said, the MH3, and this was 3 days after MH370 disappeared. Is that correct? That you did this
It was
reading?
pretty close to it. Yeah, it was within a few days. I can't remember exactly how quick I did it, but I mean, it was very much alive as far as on the news cycle,
Yeah.
and people talking about it, and people
Yeah.
looking for it and looking for wreckage. And then there is no, I mean, it just, nothing of it made any sense.
Did you feel any kind of maybe like a burden or like a sense of like responsibility maybe when you were, because obviously this can be, especially at the time, I imagine, quite a sensitive topic. You've got like families and people, wondering where their loved ones are. Like, did you feel any of that when you were putting this out on the internet?
Yes, and that's what drove me to keep going as much as what I did. Most of my posts, it was like I would do a post and people would put comments, and I would address those. If there were other follow up questions, I might look at that and say a line or two. But with this, it was just something totally different because I mean, I had thousands of comments come through on it, and I did really try to read them and legitimately address the comments, or if someone that left a name, maybe try to sense out what I felt was going on. And I so burnt myself out. I remember telling my husband, I'm like, I don't know how much more of this I can do. But then I did feel this sense of guilt and responsibility. Like, if I can help these people, I should help these people. If I was in this situation, how would I feel? I mean, you just, the pain these people were going through was horrible, and no answers and no closure. And where do you go? It was just a horrible situation. So, I mean, I went on for multiple days following up, and, following up with people and trying to do what I could, and um, just provide really anything, any sense of anything that I could. And then finally, I did have to just say, okay, I'm sorry, but this is my last post, because it was burning me out horribly. But I did try
But
to give it my all.
yeah, no, I think you did. You did a great job, and you did a lot of work too. Like you said, the blog post that I've read is has a lot in there, and that's what I wanted to ask you about as well. What is it like, as best as you can you try and explain what it's like to do a reading? Like, is it I feel like it must be draining in some kind of like a mental way. Is it mentally fatiguing to be constantly doing these readings kind of on demand?
Um, not not as much as you think. Okay, so really it depends on the topic. Dark topics, yes, they do take a lot out of me. When you're talking about especially political stuff, or just some of the evils of the world and things like that, things people are curious about, things we maybe shouldn't dwell on but should know are going on, like that type of stuff. Yeah, that very, very much is, the negativity can weigh on you. But the actual process of doing the reading, it really came easy to me. I mean, I'd put that question out there and I would just go with what I had and type it up. It probably took me longer to edit it and try to look for grammatical stuff and do all that than the actual just putting the content out there, because I just would let it flow. Like whatever I had, I just went with it and I let it flow. Now, not thinking about it
Can you
afterwards, hmm,
can
what's
you
that?
explain what it's like to let it flow? Like that's what I'm just trying to get a visual on and understand. When like what is the process for you to do a reading essentially? Like how does this information come to you? And when it comes, what makes you confident to be like, okay, that's what I feel is true and that's what I'm going to go with. Can you sort of run me through that?
So what I would do, people put, questions out there, like I said, and I start each one out with a question, and I would say that question out loud, and basically anything that came to me, and I would either see it, I would smell it, I would most times feel it, and just have that gut feeling. I just would sort
Mm,
of know, and honestly, it would be like coming through me, not to me necessarily. So the words would just come through me. I can't even say that, yeah, I'm the one actually doing the physical typing or recording it, but I would relax myself and relax my mind and just let it flow out. And somehow it would. And what would be weird is I've had times where I've went back and even reread something I've done, and I'm like, that came out of me. I mean, because that's how it feels. It just comes through me, and if you think about it, that's what
yeah.
a medium does, right? It goes through you. It doesn't go to
Yeah.
you. I'm just the instrument that's
Yeah.
being used. I experience
I
it.
mean, that's
I
literally the
see it.
definition. That's literally the
Yeah,
definition of medium, right? You're just the
yeah.
medium that this travels
So
through.
I will hear
Wow.
it. Sometimes I would taste it, you're talking about chemtrails and all that stuff, I might taste it, or I might smell it, or I'll see it, or, I'll hear maybe part of a chemical compound, or, you know what I mean? Like I will experience that,
Mhm.
but just as soon as I hear it and get it out of me, then it's gone. I'm just kind of like the tool to get it out.
Yeah.
And then when I'm done, I sort of
So
like
you think
take a breath and cleanse and detach from it, and then I'm done.
you think do you believe everyone has this skill and that it's really ultimately comes down to like clearing your mind and trusting your intuition?
I think that is a huge part of it. And here's how it was explained to me. I think some people do have it easier than other people, but fundamentally, everybody has that ability. And I love this explanation. Everybody can sing happy birthday, right? But some people can sing it to where you're like, wow, it blows your mind away. And some people just muddle through it. We all can do it. Just some have a natural ability that's really undeniable, and some have to really work at it.
Yeah. I think so too. Can you let's take on from where we were with MH370. So once you've had this reading where you've seen it kind of glitch in the matrix was your explanation. Then
Hmm.
when you would revisit it after that, what were you seeing after that?
So I would mostly see a lot of activity of them being on that island setting, as I'm trying to, recall what's going on. Sometimes I would see people, I felt like some people maybe didn't make it for whatever reason. I think there was some intel perhaps on that plane that was being guarded or coveted. So I think there were a lot of different components with it. However, I feel like when that glitch happened, it wasn't a man-made type of event. It almost was like some outside force. I don't know if I worded it like, some kind of alien technology. I don't even know what it was, but it was like something from the outside was intervening with it. But it didn't necessarily feel like some man-made thing to try to attack or get to something on the ship or on the plane. So just, yeah, it was really strange. But mostly when I would tap in, it would be like, okay, are they okay? What are they doing? Um, who's there? It was a lot of that type of stuff. And I began to be more fixated on people that people were asking me about, or family members, and hey, is this person all right, or so I started trying to hone more on the intimate details, I guess. And then it was just a lot trying to sort it out.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, one thing a lot of people have mentioned when discussing this, when I've been talking about your reading, is that it sounds a lot like the TV show Lost. Is that a show that you watched at the time? Like, do you think there could have been any kind of influence on that from that on your readings?
um, so I had watched some of Lost. Honestly, I didn't like the show, so I didn't watch it. um,
Neither did I. It didn't grip me either.
so I mean, I know the general premise of it. um, Yeah, I don't really think that was necessarily a bias of it, but yeah, I mean, I can't even tell you what I just remember the first episode of it, they were already crashed. I don't know if there was a glitch in the matrix. I don't really know the whole details of that show. I just It was really weird, and I didn't get into it. But the joke that my husband and I had is the show was called Lost because they were lost when they wrote it. I mean, I don't know. Anyway. If you love it, sorry. Don't put hate in the comments.
No, no. From what I remember, the show kind of tailed off into some like an ending that most people weren't happy with. So I'm glad I didn't invest too much time into watching that one. When was the first time that you saw the MH370 videos, or the two videos that are alleged to be MH370? You know the ones I'm
I
talking about,
think
right?
someone reached out to me, ah, maybe 6 months ago? I don't know. When
Oh
did those
wow,
videos
you only
come out?
saw those videos.
I didn't
Those
follow
videos,
it.
well,
I did not follow it or track it or anything. I was actually shocked when someone had come to me over 10 years later. I thought, "Man, I thought that thing was over." Like, I had no clue that any of that reemerged. Some website, uh, I don't even know what they were how that even came about, but yeah, I hadn't visited and that even thought about it in 10 years. I think it was 10 years ago, wasn't it? Isn't that when that
wow,
happened?
11 years ago the plane disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah, once I was done with that, I had not visited that topic in all that time until
Wow.
was it 6 months ago when all that started to come out again? I don't even know.
No, no, it's quite a few years ago. So are you
Oh, it
familiar
did?
with Ashton Forbes and his research?
I didn't follow any of that. I thought there was like a Reddit or I don't know, something recently had those videos on it, and that's how people started to reach out to me again. And I thought, wow, yeah, I really didn't even
Wow.
know that people were still doing it.
Yeah, no, it's I think it definitely exploded again around 2023, give or take. And there's been a whole lot of research into these two videos that surfaced by a guy named Ashton Forbes. I guess he's kind of took it and ran with it into
Mm,
investigating the legitimacy of those videos. I've interviewed him on this channel as well. Um, and obviously, there are people who are just vehemently denying it and trying to debunk them. Now, I actually worked as a visual effects artist before I did this, and
mhm,
my personal opinion is, given the time frame that these videos surfaced online, which was allegedly only 5 to 8 weeks after the event, these two videos surfaced
mm,
online, which, yeah, show a plane being surrounded by three orbs, encircled, and then essentially zapped out of the sky, which is obviously a very hard thing to believe that you're watching and
mhm,
digest it as something that's real. But there are just so many little nuances that would need to be done to fake those videos that just make not only would they be difficult to create from two different perspectives, those orbs rotating around the plane to match up frame by frame would be complicated. Um,
mhm.
but there is just a lot in those videos that do not make a lot of sense. And that's why I found your readings so interesting,
Huh.
because these these videos surfaced, from what I understand, like I said, about 4 to 8 weeks after the plane disappeared, somewhere in that region,
Hmm.
we got both of these videos. But your reading is from like 3 days, and it essentially describes what we see in both of those videos. So you've seen both of them, the satellite one and the sort
I
of
don't
blue
think I've
one
seen both. I
from a
saw
drone.
one because someone was asking me about it, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. And I said, "Can you send me the video?" Because I was just curious, and I saw it, and I thought, "Oh, that's interesting." It was just one, and it did have the orbs in it, but that's the only one I saw, and I thought that was something new that reemerged. I didn't realize it even came out way back then. Which is even weirder because now is when all the people seem to be reaching out to me. I would have thought along the way that they might have asked me about it. I don't know, but it must
Well,
be really
yeah, I
popular
think,
right now.
well, it is. And I mean, I think it's just a very compelling story, right? How does a plane of that size disappear without a trace? And, you know, I think like after 11 years and, the things that we've gone through as a global society in during those 11 years, I think a lot of people are starting to kind of wake up to the idea that we are not being told the truth about just kind of the world that we live in, and like the
Mhm.
true nature of reality. Like you said, you've experienced an innate sixth sense that you sort of had to manage and navigate on your own. And I think you're absolutely not alone in that by any means. And I think collectively, people are just starting to realize that we shouldn't just eat off the spoon that's put in front of us without kind of questioning what's on it. And
Mhm.
I think maybe if people are really starting to realize that even the people who don't believe that this plane was, teleported out of the sky by three orbs, I think most people would agree that whatever it is, we're not being told the truth about what happened to this plane, because our low Earth orbit is just brimming with satellites that with like high resolution sensory imaging data. Our oceans have all these amazing sonar capabilities. If a plane hit the ocean or a plane was in the sky, I think we have the capability at the highest level to find out where it went and where it is now. That's just my opinion, but I think that's probably why we're beginning to see this surge in interest, because people are really waking up to the fact that we aren't getting the answers that we deserve. I find it very compelling that you haven't actually seen both the videos. You're quite far removed from all of this, which is
I really am.
incredible. And I think that, yeah, I think that's great. Look, if you're interested, like I said, I interviewed Ashton on my channel, and
Mm.
I did that interview with the intention of trying to comprehensively cover his research thoroughly for anyone who has no idea about it. So I tried to really walk through like from the beginning to the end, show all the little bits that he's picked up along the way. So you should check that out. It's about 2 hours, so it'll be
All
a
right.
bit of your time. But if you're interested in understanding kind of how this all resurged and why, definitely take a look at that. But let's talk about. You mentioned before you thought they were potentially some kind of alien technology. What's your thoughts on that? And are you interested in the phenomenon at all? Like, do you keep up to date with kind of that world? I'll call it.
Um, I mean, yes and no. I wouldn't say obsessed about it, but I'm always try to stay in tune with what is going on. So I definitely think that there's things out there that we don't know and that our government does. And I think there are other beings out there too. I I have a theory that our Earth is much bigger than what we think it is, and we just live in a very small part of it. That's just a whole different rant I have. But extraterrestrial, terrestrial terrain, and other beings that live on other parts of Earth are, maybe more advanced or maybe have different technology. I don't think that's too big of a leap to think that that would exist or could exist. And That very well could have been what it was. I mean, I can't say for certain either way, but I can tell you something happened, and I can tell you they didn't find the wreckage, and they haven't found the plane, and they don't. It's like everybody's hush hush about it, and I think our government knows exactly what happened, whether they're responsible for it or not, and I think they know what exists and what doesn't exist. Again, they're not going to disclose that to people because they keep that for their own use and manipulation and whatever thing that they do. So yeah, I think they know exactly what happened. They just won't be honest and tell people and allow these people to have closure. That's what I think, and it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, I think that's a quite a fair assessment. And I've actually had a very similar thought before that
Mm,
either the world is perhaps bigger than we're led to believe, or at the very least there are sections of land on our that are not on our maps.
absolutely.
What
That's what I think
what
too.
makes you feel that way? What kind of led you to that?
So, you're good. Okay, I'm gonna go on the crazy here. Someone was
Yeah,
asking me about
we do
flat Earth
crazy.
early on. Okay, asking me about flat Earth early on my blog, and I remember just skipping over the question, not wanting to answer it. Not I'm like, who thinks the Earth is flat? Because you are going to have a little bit of bias when you read stuff. When you approach it, yes, you have to shut all that off. And my husband goes, you got to tackle that question. And I said, how do I even do that? He goes, you know what? You go with what you get. You don't sit and judge it. You don't assess it. You don't put your fingerprints on it. You just go with what you get. So I sat there and I thought about it and I thought, wow, maybe there's more to this than I don't know. Well, it got him researching flat Earth, and we were neither one of us flat earthers, because think about it, from the time you start school, you're already indoctrinated of what the Earth is and what it looks like. Fast forward now, all these pictures we even see of the Earth are all CGI, and they're all, I mean, just the whole thing is really kind of out there. I could talk for hours about that in itself, but so anyway, I watched this one video and it blew my mind, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it is. When you look at our moon, and they've mapped out the moon, and if the moon is a reflection of Earth, you can actually see different land masses on the moon, but it takes a very small portion of the moon. So when you were to blow that up, just like how when you see a reflection in water, if the moon is really the reflection of Earth, the Earth is much larger. So maybe, just maybe, the Earth might not be flat, but if it's larger than what we think, that's why the rise over run isn't what it should be. Like when you're making a railroad, they don't really account for it. When you're looking at sea level, the curvature isn't really there. There's so many things that the curvature isn't what it should be if the size of the Earth was what they said it was. But if it's much larger, then your rise over run is going to be much smaller. So that got me thinking about it. And again, like I said, I've gone back to a more biblical sense, right in Genesis when it talks about the earth being created. He made the firmament to separate the heaven from the waters above from the waters below. And if you're going to believe in that and the firmament is there, I think we could be like a golf ball, and we each live in these little dimples of it with the firmament covering it. And extraterrestrials exist, but they're extra terrain. They're from a different part of the terrain. Yeah, they're there, but it's from a different part of Earth. So I think maybe if the Earth is round, and this is where my husband and I differ, I think it could be round, but it's way huger than what we think it is. And there's old ancient maps talk about the ice wall. I think some of the sci-fi stuff is based on glimpses of truth, like Game of Thrones and the ice wall. I mean, how many things have like the ice wall, and how many things? I think some of the
Mm,
truth seeps
mm.
out. So I don't know. I have my own theories
Yeah,
on
I
that.
talk
But
about
that's
that a
how
lot
we
on my
even get
channel.
started. Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
So,
talk about, a lot of how I think truth seems to be littered through fiction, like, just like little
mhm,
nuggets of
mhm.
it seems to slip out in,
Yes.
movies and things like that. The big thing about that that I that sort of catches me is that you've got people who, like, sail around the world, for example. They, like, circumnavigate the globe, and they seem to do that without just with discovering sort of anything new. So I feel like I don't know. I mean, I'm not totally dismissive of it, but I feel like maybe yeah, I feel like for me, there might be land that we just don't know about, or maybe I don't know. I'm not totally opposed to it, but I it's a tough one. It's a very interesting one. Have you ever had any requests to do viewings on things around that? Like not necessarily flat Earth, but maybe like extraterrestrial or other
Oh, yeah.
worlds, other lands.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have had that, and, I don't know. I feel like there could be an area. So just because you're thinking of Mars, you might not be thinking of like a planet. It could be a place here on Earth. It's maybe just a different part of the terrain that we have not ventured to. And I don't know that that fully came to me then, because you're just sort of placing yourself in this area, but you're not zoomed out and seeing where you are in perspective to everything else. I mean, yeah, I mean, I do think other areas exist that we don't know about. This world is
Mm.
huge. I just the possibilities are endless. I don't ever put an absolute or a never, or I just go based on my gut and what feels right.
Yeah, I respect that. And I think that's the best way to go. And I think, I've talked about how people can kind of fall down the rabbit hole and, become like crazy conspiracy theorists who, believe in everything. But I don't think that's necessarily the way it is. I think it's once you realize, like we said earlier, that we aren't really told the truth or like of about our whole reality. We're kind of told a very controlled section of it, which
Mhm.
helps us remain in control. I think once you just realize that, it's not that you now believe everything, but it's kind of you now have an open mind to anything that you can't verifiably kind of prove with your own eyes. I feel like that there is just a multitude of possibilities that could be true about, yeah, other lands on our globe, the size of our globe, because who really knows if they're gonna cover up X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like the
Mhm.
boy who cried wolf in a way. Like what else are you hiding there?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have some moment in their life where they know they've been lied to, and then when you have that happen, you open yourself up to what else is out there. And it's
Exactly.
funny because even on the blog, we'll share stories like, what was your wake up moment? For me, it was 9/11. I'm like,
Yeah.
that, and it
Wow.
just depends, some of us how old you are, some people it was JFK. Um, I wasn't
Yeah.
alive and going through all that, but for me, it was definitely 9/11. And then when you had a lot of realizations of things you were told then that you knew weren't right, then you're like, okay, this government is not, you kind of
Can
have
you
this
walk me
instinct
through
to
that?
you. What's that? Can I walk you through
Can
what?
you walk me through your experience with I guess just experiencing 9/11 in general, and then I guess if at all your intuition and your medium side kind of played into that or had anything to do with that.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, so I was at work at the time, and that's when the towers got hit. And I thought, wow, the first one got hit, the second one got hit. And I remember taking a physics class in school, and we were talking about demolition and how they did it. And I remember the teacher explaining it, and we watched videos on it. And then when they broadcast how those two buildings came down, and I watched the perfect demo, happen. It's like this was not because of a plane. And it's like, wait a minute, how did a plane make a whole building collapse? And then, well, then you have this building number 7 that's clear down the road and it collapsed in the same way. Well, that visually didn't make sense either. It's like all the things just didn't make sense as you're watching it. None of it did, and then you had the plane that went down, and then the thing in the Pentagon. And the thing with the Pentagon is my husband had gone to school with people, a person that lives down there. She was, or his wife was out on the road, and we were talking, and she was walking around DC at the time with her job. She goes, "Yeah, you know what, planes sound like. You know what, different things sound like because you hear them overhead all day."
Yeah.
And she's like, "That was not a plane, and when that hit, that wasn't a plane." And then There was a lot of auditing that was happening in that part of the Pentagon that magically that paperwork disappeared. There was just too many inconsistencies. And this had nothing to even do with the reading. This is
Mm.
just like a common sense, critical analysis, you know, people talking and comparing notes. Like none of this makes sense. And, you know, they insured the Twin Towers for all this money right before the thing happened. Um, you know, they tested it, and the beams they couldn't melt with the temperature of the jet fuel. It had to be, you know, thermite. Just too many things that didn't make sense, and common sense says this is all an inside job.
Something's up here.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
then, I mean, you know, the readings then come afterwards. Yeah, hey, you know, Lynn, look at this. What is your opinion of this, or what do you think this, or what do you get here? And I remember one time when I was doing a reading, I had that smell of that chemical they used when they were doing it, and you know, I saw them wiring up the elevator shafts, and I mean, that could have been biased. I try to shut the bias out, but it's almost like you just have this gut truth that you know too going into it. You try to glean anything more that you can, uh, you know, something extra or something you feel maybe would be special to somebody to know. But yeah, that for me was the big like, oh man, we're living in a real you just can't trust anything type society. And now with AI, you really can't. I mean, it's even worse.
Yeah, you can't. And that's why I asked you about intuition before, because it's like I've said on my channel many times, with AI specifically and with the just tidal wave of different information, which just adds to the confusion of things that you find
Mhm.
online. You know, you've got 50 different news outlets all reporting different things, attacking each other, making people attack each other for having just a different belief to them, which I think is just so sad. But more than
Mhm.
ever, I think we need to, like, kind of come full circle and come back to, like, intuition and trying to shut off what is pushed into our minds through the news or through social media or whatever. And I feel like when you do that, I feel like is when you start to, like what you said, what word did you use? You kind of just get these like truths, these things that you inherently just know
Mhm.
as a truth. It becomes a lot clearer when you can shut out the noise.
Mhm. I agree, and people do need to start relying on that a whole lot more and stop relying on what everybody tells you and regurgitating that. You know, I just that happens all too
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a big problem at the moment, but I'm optimistic. I think, in the end the good will prevail. Just I think we're in a bit of a tumultuous time right now.
I would agree. I think we're in a shift as well. I pray it's for the good. um, but yeah, definitely in tough times.
Let's talk about what brought you from your, I guess let's call it, your sort of psychic endeavors and
Mhm.
more across to religion now. What made, I guess, first of all, the push to religion, but then also to drop doing your readings and kind of step away from that?
So, well, when you're doing these readings, well, and actually, we were having a big political shift too, and it just seemed like Christianity was being demonized. I mean, there's a whole um, kind of movement out there, more of the liberal mentality, but it was as if, you know, if you're a Christian, you're a racist, or you're, you know, all these things. And I didn't align with that just yet, but I have slowly come to realize if they're going to demonize something and try to take God out of everything, what is going on that they're so afraid of? Plus, I could clearly see there was a lot of satanic stuff going on in society. I mean, I would do readings, and it would just even be something as simple as the Super Bowl and the satanic symbology behind that. Or, you know, you see these music videos and what kids are idolizing. And, you know, you take like these innocent, you know, kid actors and what they're turning into. I mean, you can see it out there, the sexualization of children, the whole human trafficking thing. Hopefully that doesn't like flag your channel. But I mean,
No,
there's
it's
so
okay.
much stuff out there, and there was like so much evil out there that it really got me looking, what are they so afraid of? Well, then it got me looking at the Bible and looking at stuff and looking at different verses. And I realized if they're afraid of this, it's because they realize that that's the one thing that's going to defeat what is going on. This whole, agenda out there trying to destroy cultures and, the mass migrations and just the whole unsettling of everything. It occurred to me, or at least it felt true to me, that God was the one thing that would prevail and stop that, or at least give people peace while that was happening. So I started really looking at it, and then I had this tug to get back into going to church. And so I went to church. I was still doing the psychic stuff. I thought there was a way to still do both. I mean, I couldn't at that point really understand why I couldn't be both. As long as my heart was in the right place and I was helping people and I wasn't, um, you know, there are it the psychic thing definitely has a bad connotation. And I have personally gone to some that feel more gypsy like, but just take your money and tell you what you want to hear. I did not work that way. I took what I did very seriously, uh, and I really wanted to be pure with that and help people. So I thought as long as I stayed true to that, had good intentions, worked in what I felt was a greater good, I could still have both in my life. I could start to merge and learn more about religion and take God into my life and still have this other part too. But then this weird thing happens when you start going to church, because I've never had what I would call, you hear people say you feel convicted. I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, I've heard that word, feeling convicted of this or that. You hear it, but you don't really get it or know what it feels like. Then you'd be in these sermons and it would say, talk about, the Bible and God, and talk about, you have to live a holy life and, obey the word of God. And, you're listening to all this stuff and you're reading in the Bible. And so I started doing research in the Bible and researching for whatever reason it was bothering me. Like, uh, they didn't use the word psychic back then, but you use like intuitive or any of that kind of stuff. Even meditating, like all these different things. So I'm starting to read in the Bible about that, and it specifically talks about like witches, and they would kill witches and all this kind of stuff. And so it started to. I was reading about the occult and that kind of thing, or how those terms would relate to things in the Bible. And I thought, you know what? Is what I'm doing really not in the greater good? Am I serving people, or am I the shortcut so they don't find God themselves? Am I just the easy outlet to solve a problem when really they should look at their own self on the inside, or go to God and not let me be the shortcut? I thought I was shortchanging people
Mm.
by doing that. And so it was weighing on me. Am I really being in the greater good, or am I preventing or giving someone the easy out so they don't have to do the work themselves, or trust themselves, or seek it from a holy source? So I was having that internal debate, but I was still doing the readings. I was still trying to sort it out if there would be a way that I could do both. And I thought about it. I even prayed on it. I'm like, just give me clarity. I need an answer. I need to know, how am I supposed to do this? And then it occurred to me, when we're doing these, you're not really, he's supposed to be the judge, right? We're not supposed to be the judge of each other or what we're doing. And then when I thought about it, I thought, well, how am I to judge what I'm doing if it's right or not? Someone else might see it as wrong or right. It's like, am I just the other side of an occult coin? Is doing a Ouija board or tarot, or what I'm doing, like, who's to say what's good and what's innocent and what's not? So then I realized I really probably shouldn't be dabbling in any of this, or I need to stop and take a break from it, get some answers. I didn't really know what I was going to do, and it was really hard because I had identified with it for so long. And I didn't get into it to make money, but I was doing okay with it. And I gave that up because I just felt like I needed to hit pause and make sure I was doing and honoring what I should be doing, and also for other people too. I didn't want to do something and lead someone astray, inadvertently, not even trying to do so. And so this weighed on me.
Mm.
I mean, it was really weighing on me. And that's the whole conviction part of it, right? You're supposed to go through this until you get an answer and figure it out. And I'll never forget, I was laying in bed and I woke up and I heard distinctly in my head the word Job. Well, I was still pretty new to reading the Bible and figuring it out. And I didn't even realize that was a book in the Bible. That's how naive I am. I was like, "What?" I just could I was like, "Joe, what is that?" So I got up, drank my coffee, didn't really think too much more about it, but I kept that name in my mind, had a busy day doing my stuff, and later that day, I had to pick the kids up, go to the dentist. I go in the dentist or no, before that, I had ran a few errands, and I was waiting in the checkout lane, and I Googled it on my phone, and I was like, "Oh, that's a book in the Bible. I'm gonna have to go check that out. That must mean something." I didn't know what. I just heard a man's voice say the word joke with nobody in the house, but I heard that word. So I pick the kids up. I go to the dentist. I sit down and I was worn out. And I look over and there is a Bible sitting in the waiting room. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to read this. So I got it out and I was waiting on the kids and I start reading it. And I realized, are you familiar with the book of Job, of what that is in the Bible?
I'm not.
Okay,
Tell
so
me.
what it is, there's this man, his name's Job, and he has the very faithful, total belief in God, just totally gave himself to him, devout, that type of thing, very good man. And the devil goes to God and says, the only reason that he is faithful to you and believes in you is because you have blessed him with so much, a family, a wife, health, money. He had animals, all this kind of stuff. He says, if I took that from him, he would curse you. And God said, no, he wouldn't. This man is faithful. The devil says, well, let me test him then. And God, they go back and forth. And God finally says to him, I will let you test him, but you cannot kill him. You can test him, but basically do what you have to do. You can't kill him to test his faith. So the next thing you know, this huge, I think a war comes through, kills a bunch of his livestock. Um, some famine comes through. His family gets killed. He ends up getting like this leprosy and sores all over him. He wants to die. His life is falling apart, and it's just like everything is happening to him. But he's still praying. He still believed in God. But he even was like, "Oh, just please let me die." Well, he went through so much that God finally said to the devil, stop. You're done. You've done tested him. He still has his faith. He didn't give up. You lost this bet. So the devil stepped away, and then God rewarded him tenfold with, riches and grandchildren and his health and all this stuff. And he ended up coming out in the end 10 times better than he was in the beginning. But he was tested to the limit to where he thought he was going to die or wished he did because it was so horrible. And he came out strong because he kept his faith. So when I heard that word and I read that book, I thought to myself, okay, I have to be willing to give up everything and I'll get rewarded in the end. I just have to keep faith and have faith and be true to what I'm doing. So, a long time ago, I got my life coaching certification because I do really enjoy helping people. And I got my health and wellness certification because, again, I help people, help the neighbor lose weight and help people with diabetes. I like doing that. And then I do have this medical intuition part of me that I've kind of preyed on, and I feel like I'm okay with what I'm doing. I don't try to overstep or that type of stuff, but I help people as I can. And at least that way I feel like I'm keeping integrity with what I'm doing. I'm not just telling people the shortcut. I'm helping them and doing it in a different type of way where it's more of a dialogue back and forth to guide them through tough stuff in life.
Yeah, I like the point you made. How you said it's kind of like you're giving people a shortcut rather than allowing them to kind of go on their own journey and maybe like discover these things for themselves. The one thing I was wondering about what you said though is that, do you think God would give you or us these abilities, these innate abilities, a sixth sense to maybe, like, remote view or sense things, if it was kind of looked down upon or not something we should use? What do you think about that?
So my concern is that the abilities aren't coming from God, but they're actually coming from the devil. That is my concern because he's a deceiver. And I think he likes us playing in the occult stuff. And he gives us information that can be very scarily accurate to keep you doing more. I think that's why Ouija boards are so appealing. I think that's why tarot is so appealing because you get enough accuracy to keep you playing around in the occult world. That was my big concern, and that's from a more biblical side. That's why all of the occult tools are something you shouldn't really be dabbling with because false idols, false gods, all of that steer you away from what's pure. So you don't really know what you're doing. That's why I don't do the mediumship thing because you don't know what you're really tapping into. You think you know, but do you really know?
Mm,
It's just
mm,
I don't know. It's a fine line that I'm just kind of hitting the pause button. I mean, to each their own, but that's the warning I would give: is be careful what you're bringing in your life because I've had some things happen in my life that I'm worried I might have drawn some stuff in, and then you have to deal with that.
yeah. Is there any pushing that stuff back out, or once it's in, it's in?
Oh no, you can push it out, but it will absolutely fight to come back in. And once I started kind of detaching from it, it will come after you for sure. Like, for example, right when I started really reading the Bible, I don't think I'd gone to church yet, but I was definitely, it's in my mind and I'm questioning things and I'm reading in there and reading verses and all that. I laid in bed, and next thing I know, I have 4 kids, and my oldest son said, "Hey, my youngest was in there and he was choking. He couldn't breathe." Well, I fly out of bed like a banshee and go in there. I'm like, "What's going on?" Thought he was choking and he wasn't. And I sat him up and he was all right. And he goes, "I don't know what was going on. It was like something was around me and it was squeezing my chest and my throat." And I'm like, "What?" I got him calmed down, put him back to bed. Next thing I know, I'm, laying there kind of half asleep. And he's right beside me and he's pounding his foot on the floor. And he goes, "Mom, I can't breathe." And I'm like, "What?" I calmed him down and I'm like, I just couldn't understand what he doesn't have allergies. He wasn't choking. Like nothing was going on. So then I said, "You want me to go lay with you out in the living room?" I put him in the recliner and had him up and I laid right beside him and I held his hand. I said a prayer and then we went to sleep and he was fine. And I think that the devil does try to creep in and do stuff to wreak havoc in your life once you start to detach from doing that type of stuff. I mean, that's just one example. That's the biggest one
Mm.
that comes.
What do you like? What do you think the devil is? Like, would you like, and how do you think it ties to the occult and evil? Like, what, like, do you think the devil is like a being or a person, or is it like an energy or like a field?
I think it is like a being, and I think demons are his army. That's what I think. I think he's the adversary to God. I mean, he's a fallen angel. When you read in Revelations, I actually think he's loosed right now. I think we're in the little season. In Revelations, it talks about there was a millennial reign for 1,000 years. I think that's what this Tartarian age is. I think that's Jesus's reign. I don't know if you've ever talked about Tartarian and Tartaria on your channel or not, but all this ancient architecture and things that clearly weren't built by us. When they say a
Yeah,
building is
can you
founded,
tell me about that? Sorry to
have
cut
you ever
you off.
talked?
I haven't, but I've been looking into it and I've been very interested by it and I've been thinking about and wanting to do a video on it, but
Oh,
I haven't gone deep enough yet. But please, if you know about it and you're interested in it, I would love to hear what you think about
okay.
it.
So, I mean, I could talk forever on that too. But basically, what I think is um, there was a millennial reign in which, you know, Jesus reigned, and he was here for 1,000 years. And when you look at ancient architecture, there is no way that we built it. So I think what's
It's
happened
very
is it was
different.
built, yeah, it's, and what? Did we build it with wooden mallets and um, on dirt mud roads with a horse and buggy and candlelight? Like, we didn't build stuff like that back in the 18 and 1700s. We built stuff that looked like shanties. That's what we built. That stuff was there, and we just came in and stole it. That's what I think. And that's why there's so many, the Chicago fire and all these fires. Look how many fires and destruction. They're destroying evidence. That's what it is. They want to erase what was really there because they want to lie about our history. It's just, it's absolutely insane. And when you look at, sometimes you'll see the dates on things and you'll see an I or a J, and I think that stands for like Jesus year, whatever it is, and they want to say it's 1,000 something. Like, I think they're messing with the dates, and they're messing with all that. And the other thing I think is interesting is, when they say something was founded, why are you saying it's found? You either built it or you didn't. But when you say it was founded in year blah blah blah, that means that's a year that you found this building. All these castles that don't have bathrooms in them. That's because when they lived back then, they probably ate different. They probably didn't excrete the way that we do. I mean, I think it was just a different type of life. And we came in and we stole the remnants of what's there and we've created it. I do think there was a mud flood and it destroyed a bunch of it, but I believe that was the Jesus millennial reign. And then something happened. It destroyed a lot of stuff. People went in, and the people tried to go in and steal it, claim it as their own. These rich Rockefellers and whoever come in. They didn't create any of that. They just took what was already there as their own. And that's what I think the whole Tartarian reign is. It's really when Jesus was here. But then in the Bible, when it talks about after that 1,000 year reign, the devil would be loosed for a short season. I think we're in the short season right now where the devil is loose. And I think he is a being that sort of can shapeshift into different things. And then he has demons that are like his minions that go in and possess people. That's why half these people on drugs look like zombies, because I think they've opened themselves up and they're just demon filled. I mean, the way people act irrationally, just there's so much stuff, and I think that's why they want to pump drugs in people and the psych medicines and all that stuff, because when your mind isn't completely sober, you are open for an attack by anything and everything. And I don't know. I don't know how much you want me to ramble, but
Yeah.
I can even attest to it because before I became more biblically aligned, I used to like to go out and have a beer. That was something that changed in my life. I no longer do that. I have never been a person to really, do drugs. To each their own. That is not my thing. But I did have an instance with a gummy, and I came to the realization then that is how demons possess your body when your inhibitions are low. So, I could go into that if you want, but I'm just saying, I believe that we are in a very demonic time right now. And he's a being that shapeshifts around, and he's trying to take advantage of his little season before he gets put to rest permanently.
Y- yeah. No, I think you're. I would generally agree with that. It definitely feels like with the way the world is and the things that we touched on earlier, with the conflict, like the social division that seems to be engineered intentionally. There is a lot to that makes you kind of feel like you're on the right track there. What I wanna what I wanted to ask you about with that though is that you said we're potentially approaching or in that shift though. Do you believe that shift is the end of what you're saying is the little season and that we are like maybe the global sort of consciousness is elevating and that's like we said, people are awakening to the fact that there is something that feels kind of nefarious going on globally and that we may actually be beginning to awaken and shift out of that.
Oh, I think so. I definitely think that. And it's strange too because I've seen a lot of shift into Christianity. Like, people I haven't talked to forever are sort of going down the same path that we're going down. but it's not, we had no influence on that. It's just like people are coming to it on their own and they're realizing,
Mm,
and I have seen it a lot. There's a big push of people out there that have like quit drinking or, given up addictions or bad habits. Just, I've seen a lot of it, and people are just slowly coming to terms with needing to rein it in for whatever reason. Something's tugging at them to do so. And I think that's just part of it. I think it is part of that elevated consciousness of, hey, what is going on out there? And we need to get ready for it, get our heart in the right place, our head in the right place, and just be ready. It's like we don't really know what or when, but we know there's something. And I think most people agree to that.
yeah, I definitely agree, and I've never been like a religious person. I went to churches a couple of times when I was a kid, more so just kind of like hanging out with friends and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But never sort of got involved long term. But through my study and research of, I guess, the phenomenon, which I guess is more in the realm of like, UFOs, non human intelligence, psychic abilities, it has drawn me to believing in that. I guess I wouldn't label myself a Christian or anything because I don't go to church. I guess I feel a lot more spiritual though. Through researching this stuff, it has led me definitely to believe that like God is real as some kind of creator, and that there does seem to be some kind of swinging pendulum of energy in the world, which I guess you could call like good and evil. And a lot of people talk about 2027. Have you heard anything about that date? Have you ever been asked to remote view anything about 2027?
See, people ask me about dates all the time, and I don't know. I don't really get too hung up on it. And I think it's because back when 2012, and that was supposed to be the apocalypse, everybody was asking me about it. And then it was like, okay, that didn't happen. So what's the next one? And then what's the next one? So I sort of lost
Mm,
my, I don't know, my desire, I guess is a good word for trying to keep, looking at this future
the
thing. It's like,
dates.
let's worry about right
Yeah.
now and what you can do, because people put all this fixation on stuff that's probably not going to happen. I mean, I'm not saying it won't, but we
Yeah.
gotta
But I mean,
live for
have you
now.
ever considered that like oh, I totally agree. I often say because I actually did like a 2-hour video yesterday. We did a live show talking about 2027, and my attitude is, if it is going to happen, what are you going to do about it? There's no point. You just got to enjoy the now and just live in the moment, regardless.
Hmm.
Because if you're living in that constant state of fear, then you're essentially just kind of like paralyzing your own life. But what I wanted to ask you about 2027, and I think just, well, dates in general that have come and nothing's happened. Do you feel that like they may not have been the end of the world as they were said to be, but they maybe did perhaps mark some kind of shift in society, in like that consciousness, that global consciousness or that energy? Because I mean, 2000, the year 2000 was,
Mm.
I guess, the first really well known one, the Y2K. And I mean, I feel like, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, they were very distinct. They had like a culture to them, they had a
Hmm.
fashion, they had a style. But I feel like after the year 2000, it all just kind of blurred, and it's been just kind of like a bit of a weird blur. Like the culture hasn't changed and evolved the way that it did back in like every decade. Um, and then I guess from 2012, I mean, I feel like just from those points, 9/11, things have just only kind of gotten weirder. Um, I don't know. So I guess the question I'm kind of asking you is, think it may not have been the end of the world in a physical like just total annihilation sense, but I don't know. Maybe it was a shift in just kind of like that energy, that pendulum between good and evil. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I definitely think there's been a shift in, yeah, I see what you're saying about the good and evil, because things are just much different. And You're right. I mean, the 80s, they were the best. I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm like, but for me, when you talk about it being a blur, I do agree, but I see what's happening is they're getting people to live more in a virtual world versus a human interaction world. Once technology started to take off and phones became a thing and all that, people don't really converse. Everybody's got their head in their phone or typing, texting, video games. So it's almost like, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, people did stuff. We were out doing things. You were out riding your bike and hanging out with the neighbor kids, and you did stuff. Now everybody's poked in their house on a device, and I think that's partly how everything is so blurred, because it's just more of the same. Even more, they're just getting sucked into these devices.
Yeah, I agree. We are all being pulled into this virtual world, and you know, not to again, it's like I feel like I'm just calling it how it is, and that does how seem to often be a little bit negative. But I am a positive person. But it does seem like to have everyone in living in a virtual world, that is bringing everyone into a world that is able to be manipulated and controlled,
Yes.
right? They can't
Yes.
control your day-to-day interactions with people around you, but if we're all kind of in this space online where, anonymous accounts or sources that we can't verify with our own five senses are giving us all this information that are stoking fear and anxiety and conflict, then all of a sudden we no longer have autonomy of our minds and our emotions. And yeah, we
Mhm.
live in this kind of controlled virtual reality. And, I totally am aware of the irony here, because without it, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation. And there's like this weird
Right.
dichotomy of like t- technology being bad for us, which I think it is, in certain aspects. But then at the same time, it does allow people to, spread a message, connect, and do incredible things like have a face to face conversation from the other side of the
Mhm.
world. So it is a tough thing to navigate.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I worry about it. If I just think that people are losing that skill to converse and talk, and I don't know. It'll be interesting. And you're
Yeah.
right. People are so much
Y-
more manipulated because the propaganda is right in front of you. And once they can control that, they can control how you think, unless you just detach from it or realize what's going on. But most people don't. And I think it's a slow drip. It's not like it happens overnight. So I don't know. I don't know how you get away
Yeah.
from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one. But like I said, I think this shift and this awakening that's kind of happening right now, that is a part of it. I think people are slowly starting to realize that, why would I allow some account online that has no face, a fake name, to dictate my emotions essentially? Like, why would I let what someone is saying online get to me in that way? Like, I feel like people are putting too much weight in this virtual world, and that, again, it can be a great tool. It can be a way to keep in touch with people, or, keep up to date with some things. But
Right.
I feel like we need to reel it in a little bit. Like you said earlier, we need to reel it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Lynn. Well, thank you. I think this has been. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
That's
You
great.
have an amazing energy. Great chat. Lots of awesome avenues that we went into, and I'd love to do it again someday.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. You have to come up with your new
Yeah,
list. We'll talk about we'll
yeah,
talk
I
about
will.
Tartary and millennial reign and all of that. I'll
Yeah,
let you do some research.
I feel like
Yeah.
there's a lot we could get into. Is there anywhere that you want to direct people? I know you're not doing your blog and your readings anymore, but is there anything you'd like to for people to check out if they want to
Well, sure.
get in contact with you?
So I did shift my blog. So I am Focus Sessions at .blogspot.com. So I go in there and I talk about health, and I do talk about conspiracy stuff. I mean, I'm a conspiracy girl at heart. You can't take that away from me. But I just do it from a more matter of fact, and people ask me questions, and we have a discussion on there. And I put health stuff in there all the time. Um, things like sunglasses might not be great for you, or your sunscreen is probably worse for you than letting yourself get natural vitamin D, like all that kind of stuff. So I go in there and I talk about all kinds of alternative stuff. So if you want to check me out at focussessions.blogspot.com, I would love you for it. um, so
Awesome.
yeah.
And and your ex? Do you use your ex account?
Yes, I'm just at Focus Sessions, so you'll find me there. And I think that's how you found me, actually.
Yeah, that's how I got you. Awesome.
All
All
right.
right, thank you again so much, Lynn.
All right, thank you, and you have a great one.
Eventually, people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.